Let me start from the beginning. My name is Jack, and I have been married to Emily for nearly a decade. We have two kids, Liam and Sophie, and from the outside, our life seemed picture perfect. I thought I had it all: a beautiful wife, wonderful kids, and a job that I didn't hate too much, but oh, how wrong I was. About 6 months ago, I started noticing Emily's behavior change. She was always on her phone, smiling at texts, and becoming more distant. At first, I chalked it up to stress. I mean, who isn't stressed these days, right? But things kept getting worse. She started coming home late, saying she was out with friends, and she even stopped being affectionate with me. I decided to play detective. One evening, after she went to bed, I checked her phone. She was smart enough to delete messages, but not smart enough to clear her call log. A particular number showed up repeatedly. I jotted it down, and the next day I called it. "Hello?" A male voice answered. I hung up immediately, my heart racing. Who the hell was this guy? I hired a private investigator to get to the bottom of it. A few days later, the PI handed me a folder filled with photos of Emily with this guy, laughing, holding hands, and even kissing. There was no mistaking it, she was cheating on me. My blood boiled as I stared at the images. How could she do this to us? I confronted her that night. "Emily, who is he?" I demanded, tossing the photos onto the kitchen table. Her face went pale and she stammered, "Ooh, what are you talking about?" "Dante played dumb with me," I snapped, pushing the photos towards her. "I know you've been seeing someone else. How long has this been going on?" She broke down crying, admitting to the affair. She tried to justify it, saying she felt neglected and unhappy. I couldn't believe her nerve trying to turn this around on me. But what really floored me was when she said, "Ivy filed for divorce. I am taking the kids, Jack. They deserve a better life." I was stunned, but I had a plan. I had already anticipated this move. I hired a ruthless lawyer and drafted a contract that would make her think twice about her decision. When I presented it to her, her eyes widened in shock. The contract was ironclad, giving me full custody of Liam and Sophie unless she admitted to the affair in court. Emily's tears turned to anger. "You bastard!" she screamed. "You think you can blackmail me?" "No," I replied calmly. "I'm just protecting my kids from a liar and a cheater." Days turned into weeks, and during this time, she continued her relationship with her lover, Richard. But karma has a funny way of catching up. One evening, I got a frantic call from Emily. "Jack, it's Richard. I just found out he's been cheating on me with several women. He's a serial cheater." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. "Well, Emily, it seems like you two were made for each other," I said coldly. Her sobs echoed through the phone. "No, no, it can't be true!" she cried out in despair. It was the most dramatic thing I had ever witnessed. And honestly, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction watching her world crumble. But this was just the beginning. Little did Emily know the surprises were far from over. Emily's despair over Richard's betrayal was palpable, and despite everything, a part of me pitied her. But then, I remembered the pain she had caused me and our kids. It was time to focus on my children and prepare for the storm that was surely coming our way. A few days after her dramatic breakdown, Emily tried to act like everything could go back to normal. She started being extra nice to me and overly attentive to the kids. It was so transparent. It was almost laughable. "Jack, I've been thinking," she started one evening, sitting across from me at the dining table. "Maybe we can work things out. For the kids?" I stared at her, incredulous. "Emily, do you honestly think you can just waltz back into our lives after what you've done? You betrayed me. You betrayed us." Her face fell, but she didn't give up. "People make mistakes, Jack. We can get through this." I shook my head. "Mistakes? Emily, this wasn't a mistake. It was a series of calculated decisions. And now, you're just scared because Richard turned out to be worse than you thought." The next day, she met with her lawyer to review the contract I had prepared. She came home fuming. "You really think you can take the kids away from me?" she hissed, throwing the papers on the table. "If you were willing to admit to the affair in court, we can let a judge decide," I replied, keeping my cool. Her face contorted with rage. "You are such an asshole, Jack." But I knew her anger was rooted in fear. She had underestimated me, thinking she could walk all over me while keeping her comfortable life intact. She stormed out of the house, probably to vent to one of her friends. I used the opportunity to call my lawyer and strategize our next moves. That evening, Emily didn't come home. I tucked the kids into bed, trying to keep their routine as normal as possible. Liam, my eldest, looked at me with worried eyes. "Dad, is Mom mad at us?" "No, buddy," I reassured him, forcing a smile. "Mom and Dad are just working through some things. But remember, we both love you very much." The next morning, Emily returned looking disheveled and exhausted. She had spent the night at a friend S' place, or so she claimed. She didn't meet my eyes as she made her way to the kitchen. We continued living under the same roof, but it was a tense and toxic environment. Emily kept trying to manipulate the situation, alternating between begging for forgiveness and threatening to take the kids. But I stood my ground, making it clear that I would not back down. Then, the next bombshell dropped. My lawyer called me with some interesting news. "Jack, we've found something on Richard. It turns out he has got a pretty shady history. Multiple affairs, yes, but also some questionable financial dealings. He is not exactly the stable figure Emily thought he was." I couldn't help but smirk. This was exactly what I needed. "Thanks, Mike. Keep digging. The more we have, the better." With this new information, I knew Emily S.'s position was even weaker. She was already emotionally shattered by Richard S.'s betrayal, and now, knowing that he was a financial disaster too, would hit her hard. That evening, I decided to drop the news. Emily was in the living room staring blankly at the TV. I sat down beside her, keeping a safe distance. "Emily, we need to talk." She looked at me warily. "What now, Jack?" "I have done some digging on Richard," I began, watching her face closely. "Turns out he's not just a cheater. He has also got a lot of financial skeletons in his closet." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw genuine fear. "What are you talking about?" I handed her a folder containing the findings. "He has been involved in some shady deals, Emily. He is not the knight in shining armor you thought he was." As she flipped through the documents, her hands started to shake. "No, this can't be happening. I need to think." She stood up abruptly, clutching the folder to her chest, and rushed upstairs. I could hear her sobbing from the hallway. Part of me felt a pang of guilt, but I reminded myself that this was her doing. She had shattered our lives, and now she had to face the consequences. The days passed with Emily growing more desperate and unhinged. She tried to contact Richard, but he was already distancing himself from her. One evening, she finally broke down in front of me. "Jack, please," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Help me, I don't know what to do." I looked at her, feeling a mixture of pity and anger. "Emily, you need to own up to your mistakes. I am willing to negotiate, but only if you are honest and put the kids first." She nodded, defeated. "Okay, Jack, I'll do whatever it takes." Little did she know the surprises were far from over. Emily's desperation grew more apparent with each passing day. She started cooperating, at least on the surface, but I could see the wheels turning in her head, plotting her next move. I wasn't going to let my guard down, not for a second. The day of the court hearing arrived. Emily and I both dressed our best, presenting a united front, but the tension between us was palpable. As we walked into the courtroom, I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This was it. Everything was about to be laid bare. Our lawyers did most of the talking. My attorney, Mike, laid out the evidence meticulously. He painted a clear picture of Emily S.'s infidelity, her plans to take the kids, and her lover S.'s shady past. Emily S.'s lawyer tried to counter, but the evidence was damning. Emily had no choice but to admit to the affair. I glanced at her occasionally during the proceedings. She looked small and defeated, a far cry from the confident woman who had once stood beside me. When it was her turn to speak, she stammered through her testimony, tears streaming down her face. She tried to play the victim, but the judge wasn't buying it. Finally, the judge called for a recess. As we waited for the final decision, Emily approached me in the hallway. "Jack, please, I am begging you, Dawn to take the kids away from me." I sighed, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. "Emily, this isn't just about you and me. It is about what is best for Liam and Sophie. You need to get your act together if you want to be a part of their lives." She nodded, wiping her tears. I will. I promise. The judge called us back in. The decision was swift and, to me, fair. I was granted primary custody of the kids, with Emily getting visitation rights. She was visibly crushed, but nodded in acceptance. As we left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a lingering sense of betrayal. But I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter for me and the kids. Over the next few weeks, Emily tried to mend her relationship with the kids. She showed up for her visitation times, took them out, and tried to be the best mom she could be. I kept a close eye, making sure she was holding up her end of the bargain. One evening, after she had dropped the kids off, she lingered at the door. "Jack, can we talk?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. We sat in the living room, the silence heavy between us. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice soft. I shrugged. "I am managing. How about you?" She sighed. "It's hard. I miss them so much." "They miss you too," I admitted. "But this is how it has to be for now." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. I wish things were different. Me too, Emily. Me too." As she left, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Despite everything, she was still the mother of my children. But I had to stay strong for them. They needed stability, and I was determined to provide that. A few days later, I received a call from my lawyer. "Jack, we've got another development. Richard S. financial dealings are worse than we thought. He's under investigation for fraud." I couldn't help but laugh. "You've got to be kidding me. No joke. This could work in your favor if Emily tries to push for more custody." I thanked him and hung up, feeling a strange sense of vindication. Karma was really doing its job. Emily was about to face another storm, and I had to be ready to protect my kids from the fallout. The next time Emily came to pick up the kids, I decided to lay it out for her. "Emily, you need to know something. Richard is under investigation for fraud." Her face went pale. "What? How do you know?" "My lawyer found out. You need to stay away from him, for your sake and the kids." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea. I feel so stupid." "It's not about feeling stupid," I said, trying to be as gentle as possible. "It's about making better choices moving forward." As she drove away with the kids, I felt a sense of closure. Emily had a lot to deal with, and I hoped she would use this as an opportunity to turn her life around. But one thing was certain: this roller coaster was far from over. With Richard out of the picture and Emily trying to piece her life back together, things began to settle into a new normal. The kids were adjusting surprisingly well, and I made sure to keep our routine steady and supportive. Every day, I felt a little more hopeful about the future. One evening, as I was helping Liam with his homework, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. "Can we talk?" "It's important." I sighed and texted back, "Sure, come over after the kids are in bed." Later that night, Emily showed up at the door, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. I invited her in, and we sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us heavy. "Jack, I need to tell you something," she started, her voice trembling. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm trying to fix things, but there's something you should know. I think I'm pregnant." My heart stopped. "Pregnant? Is it Richard S.?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I don't know what to do." I stared at her, trying to process this new twist. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated. "Have you been to a doctor?" "Not yet," she admitted. "I just took a home test. I'm scared, Jack." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Emily, you need to see a doctor and figure out what's best for you and the baby. But you also need to think about how this will affect Liam and Sophie. They've been through so much already." She nodded, her sobs becoming louder. "I know. I never wanted any of this." The next few weeks were a blur of emotions and decisions. Emily confirmed the pregnancy with a doctor, and we had to figure out how to navigate this new reality. Richard was still under investigation and had no idea about the baby. Emily was terrified to tell him, fearing his reaction and the impact on her already fragile life. One evening, Emily called me, her voice shaking. "Jack, I've decided to keep the baby. I know it is not going to be easy, but I can go through with an abortion." I sighed, feeling a mix of relief and dread. "Okay, Emily, we'll figure this out. But you need to be honest with Richard. He deserves to know." She agreed, and a few days later, she told Richard the news. He reacted exactly as we feared, angry, accusatory, and threatening to disappear. Emily was devastated but stood her ground, telling him she would raise the baby with or without his help. In the meantime, I focused on the kids, trying to give them the stability they needed. I could see the confusion in their eyes, sensing the tension between me and Emily. I decided it was time to sit them down and explain things as best as I could. "Hey, Liam, Sophie," I said one evening after dinner. "Can we talk for a minute?" They nodded, their small faces looking up at me with curiosity. "Mommy and I have been going through some changes," I began, choosing my words carefully. "We are not together anymore, but we both love you very much. And soon, you're going to have a little brother or sister." Sophie's eyes widened. "A baby? Like a real baby?" I nodded, smiling. "Yes, a real baby. It's going to be different, but we'll all figure it out together." Liam looked more thoughtful. "Is the baby going to live with us, Daddy?" "Well, the baby will live with Mommy, but you all get to see them and help take care of them when you are with her." They seemed to accept this, and I was relieved to see them adapt so quickly. Kids are resilient, but I knew we had to be careful about how we navigated these waters. One night, as I was tucking Liam into bed, he asked, "Daddy, are you and Mommy ever going to be happy again?" The question hit me hard. I sat down beside him and stroked his hair. "We are both going to be happy, buddy. It just might take some time. But we are doing everything we can to make sure you and Sophie are happy and safe." He nodded, his little face serious. "I just want us to be a family." "We are a family," I assured him. "No matter what, we'll always be a family." As Emily's pregnancy progressed, she and I found a tentative peace. We weren't back together, but we were co-parenting and navigating this new chapter with as much grace as we could muster. There were still moments of tension, of course, but we were trying. One day, Emily called me, her voice filled with emotion. "Jack, I found out the baby's gender. It is a girl, another daughter." I felt a strange mix of emotions, but mostly I hoped that this baby would bring some healing to all of us. "That's wonderful, Emily," I said, trying to sound supportive. "We'll make it work." As the months passed, we prepared for the baby's arrival. Emily moved into a small apartment nearby, and we arranged a room for the baby. Despite everything, we were making it work. Then, in a surprising turn of events, Richard reached out. He had been cleared of most of the charges and wanted to be part of his child's life. Emily was hesitant, but we agreed it was important for the baby to know her father. Richard's involvement added another layer of complexity, but we navigated it as best as we could. He was a part of our lives now, whether we liked it or not. The day Emily went into labor, I was there with her. It was a long, emotional day, but when I held that tiny baby girl in my arms, I felt a surge of hope. She was innocent, a fresh start, and a reminder that life goes on. We named her Grace, and as I looked into her tiny face, I realized that despite the pain, the betrayal, and the uncertainty, we were going to be okay. We had to be, for Grace, for Liam and Sophie, and for ourselves. Life had thrown us more curveballs than I could have imagined, but we were stronger for it. And as we took our first steps into this new chapter, I knew that we would face whatever came next, together. As Grace grew, so did the complexities of our blended family. Emily and I managed to establish a somewhat stable co-parenting routine, though there were moments when the past threatened to disrupt our fragile peace. Richard's presence, now more frequent, added another layer of tension, but he was making an effort to be involved in Grace's life. One evening, Emily dropped by to pick up Liam and Sophie. She looked exhausted, the toll of single motherhood evident on her face. "Jack, can we talk for a minute?" she asked after the kids ran off to pack their things. "Sure," I said, leading her to the kitchen. "What is up?" "I've been thinking," she began, hesitating. "I want to try and make things better for all of us. Maybe we could start doing more things together as a family, for the kids' sake." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like family outings? With Richard?" She nodded. "I know it's awkward, but Grace deserves to know her siblings and us together, even if we are not together." I sighed, considering her words. It made sense, but the idea of spending time with Richard was not appealing. Still, for the kids, I could try. Okay, Emily, we can try that. But let us take it slow. She smiled, relief washing over her face. Thank you, Jack. It means a lot. Our first attempt at a family outing was a picnic in the park. The kids were excited, and I tried to put on a brave face. Richard arrived with Emily and Grace, looking just as nervous as I felt. We exchanged awkward greetings and settled on a spot under a large oak tree. Liam and Sophie ran off to play while Grace sat in her stroller, cooing at the world around her. Emily and I tried to make small talk, but the tension was palpable. Richard eventually joined in, and to my surprise, he seemed genuinely interested in making this work. I know I have caused a lot of trouble, Richard said, looking at me, but I want to do right by Grace and Emily. I hope we can find a way to coexist. I nodded, appreciating his honesty. We are all here for the kids. Let us focus on that. The day went surprisingly well. Watching the kids play together and seeing Grace's curious eyes light up at the sight of her siblings brought a sense of peace. Maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. However, old wounds dawned to heal overnight. As much as we tried to move forward, the past had a way of creeping back in. One night, after dropping off the kids, Emily lingered again. Jack, I've been thinking about us, she said softly. I know I messed up, but I miss what we had. Do you think there's any chance we could ever find our way back to each other? Her words caught me off guard. I had buried my feelings, focusing on the kids and our new reality. Seeing her vulnerability stirred something inside me, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. Emily, I don't know, I replied honestly. A lot has happened. It's not just about us anymore. We need to focus on the kids and what is best for them. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I understand. I just wanted you to know how I feel. Days turned into weeks, and our new routine started to feel normal. The kids adapted well, and I found myself appreciating the small moments of joy. But the question of whether Emily and I could ever reconcile lingered in the back of my mind. One evening, as I was tucking Sophie into bed, she looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. Daddy, do you still love Mommy? Her question hit me hard. I sat down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sweetie, Mommy and I love you and Liam very much. That will never change. But sometimes grown-ups have problems that make it hard for them to be together. She frowned, processing my words. But you used to love each other, right? I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, we did. And we still care about each other. We're just figuring out a new way to be a family. She seemed to accept this, snuggling into her pillow. Okay, Daddy. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart, I whispered, kissing her forehead. After leaving Sophie's room, I sat in the living room, lost in thought. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive Emily completely. The betrayal had cut deep, and the scars were still fresh. But seeing the kids' resilience and their need for stability made me want to try. The next day, I called Emily. Hey, can we talk? Of course, she replied, sounding hopeful. Let's take a walk, I suggested. We met at a nearby park, the same one where we had our first family outing with Richard. As we walked, I took a deep breath. Emily, I've been thinking a lot about us. I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were, but I'm willing to try and see where this goes, for the kids and for us. She looked at me, tears of relief in her eyes. Thank you, Jack. That means the world to me. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation, but it was a step forward. We agreed to start with therapy, individually and together, to work through our issues. It was going to be a long and difficult journey, but for the sake of our family, it was a journey worth taking. As we navigated this new path, I realized that forgiveness and trust take time. But with Grace's innocent smile, Liam and Sophie's unwavering love, and a glimmer of hope, I knew we had a fighting chance. And sometimes, that's all you need. Emily and I started therapy the following week. It was awkward at first, sitting across from each other in the therapist's office, recounting the pain and betrayal we had experienced. But as the sessions progressed, I began to see a glimmer of understanding and remorse in Emily S.'s eyes. She was genuinely trying, and that meant something. One of the hardest parts of therapy was facing my own anger and hurt. The therapist encouraged me to express my feelings openly, and while it was cathartic, it was also incredibly painful. Emily listened, often with tears in her eyes, and for the first time, I felt she truly understood the depth of the pain she had caused. Outside of therapy, we tried to rebuild our relationship slowly. We started doing small things together as a family, like movie nights and weekend outings. Richard, to his credit, respected our space and focused on his role as Grace S.'s father. It was an uneasy balance, but it worked for the most part. One evening, after a particularly emotional therapy session, Emily and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The kids were playing in the yard, their laughter echoing around us. "Jack, I want to thank you," Emily said softly, "for giving us a chance to fix this. I know it is not easy." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The truth was, I still had doubts, but I was willing to try, for the kids and for the memories of the good times we had shared. Just as we were starting to find a rhythm, another curveball was thrown our way. Richard S.'s investigation took a darker turn, revealing connections to some serious financial crimes. He was arrested, and Emily was left reeling once again. "I can't believe this is happening," she said one night, her voice trembling with fear. "What if they try to take Grace away from me?" I took her hand, trying to reassure her. "We'll fight it, Emily. Grace needs you, and we'll make sure she stays with you." The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional upheaval. Richard S.'s arrest meant Emily had to face numerous court appearances and questions about her relationship with him. It was exhausting, but she handled it with a strength I hadn't seen in her before. Our therapist helped us navigate these turbulent waters, encouraging us to support each other and focus on what really mattered: the kids. Despite everything, Liam, Sophie, and Grace were the anchors that kept us grounded. One day, after a particularly grueling court session, Emily broke down in tears. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Jack. It's too much." I held her close, feeling her pain. "We'll get through this, Emily, one step at a time." As Richard S.'s trial progressed, it became clear that he was going to face significant jail time. Emily was devastated, not just for herself, but for Grace. The idea of her daughter growing up without a father was heartbreaking. During one of our therapy sessions, the therapist suggested something that took us both by surprise. "Have you considered moving away? Starting fresh somewhere else?" Emily and I exchanged glances. It was a radical idea, but the more we thought about it, the more it made sense. A fresh start could be exactly what we needed to leave the past behind and focus on the future. We spent the next few weeks discussing the possibility. It wasn't an easy decision. Leaving behind the familiar, the support of family and friends was daunting. But the prospect of a new beginning, away from the shadows of betrayal and legal battles, was enticing. Eventually, we decided to move to a small town a few hours away. It was a place where no one knew our story, where we could rebuild our lives on our terms. We found a charming house with a big backyard for the kids and made the move over the summer. The transition was challenging. The kids had to adjust to new schools and make new friends. Emily and I had to find new jobs and establish a routine. But there was also a sense of excitement and hope. This was our chance to start over, to create a life free from the past's shadows. Our therapy sessions continued, now with a new therapist in our new town. We worked hard to rebuild trust and communication. It wasn't easy and there were setbacks, but we were committed to making it work. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Emily and I sat on our new porch watching the stars. The night was peaceful, the air filled with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. "Do you think we can really make this work?" Emily asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't know, Emily, but I'm willing to try. For the kids, for us, for the future." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I am willing to try too, Jack. Thank you for giving us this chance." As we sat there, under the starry sky, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I believed we could make it. Together, we would navigate the trials and tribulations, rebuilding our lives and creating a new story for our family. And so, we began this new chapter, filled with uncertainty, but also with hope and determination. The past would always be a part of us, but it didn't have to define our future. We had the power to create a new story, one filled with love, forgiveness, and resilience. The first few months in our new town were a whirlwind of adjustments. We focused on making the house a home, unpacking boxes, and settling into our new routines. The kids adapted quickly, their resilience shining through as they made new friends and embraced their new school. Seeing them happy made the challenges worth it. Emily and I continued our therapy sessions, both individually and together. The new therapist, Dr. Parker, was insightful and compassionate, guiding us through the complex emotions and unresolved issues. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I wondered if we'd ever truly heal, but we kept at it. One evening, as we were unpacking the last of the boxes, Emily found an old photo album. We sat on the living room floor, flipping through the pages, reminiscing about the good times. There were pictures of our wedding, the births of Liam and Sophie, and countless family vacations. "Look at us," Emily said softly, pointing to a photo of us at the beach, smiling and carefree. We were so happy. We were, I agreed, feeling a pang of nostalgia. But that doesn't mean we can't be happy again. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hope and uncertainty. "Do you really believe that, Jack?" "I do," I said, squeezing her hand. "We've been through hell, but we're still here. And as long as we were willing to try, I think we can find our way back to happiness." The next day, we decided to take a family hike in the nearby woods. The crisp autumn air and the vibrant colors of the changing leaves provided a perfect backdrop for a fresh start. We laughed, talked, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like we were a real family again. As we reached the top of a small hill, we stopped to catch our breath. Liam and Sophie were ahead, playing with Grace, who was giggling in her stroller. Emily and I stood back, watching them with a sense of contentment. "This is nice," Emily said, her voice filled with warmth. "It is," I agreed, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. It's moments like these that remind me why we are doing this. That evening, as we were getting ready for bed, Emily turned to me. "Jack, I've been thinking. Maybe we should have a small get-together with our new neighbors. It could be a way to start fresh and build a support system here." I nodded, liking the idea. "That sounds great. Let us plan it." We set a date for the following weekend and invited a few neighbors. The get-together was a success, filled with laughter, good food, and new friendships. It felt good to connect with people and start building a community. Over the next few months, our new life began to take shape. The kids thrived in school, making friends and excelling in their activities. Emily found a job at a local boutique, and I started working at a nearby tech company. We fell into a comfortable routine, balancing work, family, and therapy. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, Emily looked at me with a smile. "You know, Jack, I think we are doing okay. Better than okay, actually." I smiled back, feeling a warmth in my chest. "Yeah, I think we are." We continued to attend therapy, and slowly but surely, we rebuilt our trust and communication. It wasn't perfect, and there were still tough days, but we were committed to making it work. As Grace's first birthday approached, we decided to throw a small party. It was a milestone that symbolized not just her growth, but ours as a family. We invited our new friends and neighbors, and the day was filled with joy and laughter. During the party, Emily pulled me aside. "Jack, I wanted to say thank you for everything, for giving us a chance to heal and for being there for the kids and me." I looked at her, feeling a surge of emotion. "Emily, we've come a long way, and I'm proud of us. We are doing this together, and that is what matters." The party continued late into the evening, with the kids running around and Grace being passed from one adoring guest to another. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the backyard, I realized that this was what I had been fighting for. A chance to create new memories, to build a future where love and forgiveness could flourish. As the guests left and the house quieted down, Emily and I sat on the porch watching the stars. It had become our ritual, a moment of peace amidst the chaos of life. "Do you think we'll ever fully heal?" Emily asked, her voice filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I think healing is a journey, not a destination," I replied, taking her hand. "We'll have good days and bad days, but as long as we are together and committed to making it work, we'll be okay." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "I like that. A journey." As we sat there under the starlit sky, I felt a sense of calm. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were on it together. And for the first time in a long while, I believed that we could create a future filled with love, resilience, and happiness. Life in our new town continued to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Emily and I kept working on our relationship, both in therapy and in everyday life. The kids were thriving, and we were slowly but surely building a new support system with our neighbors and friends. But, as always, life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One evening, just as we were sitting down for dinner, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated but answered it anyway. "Hello?" "Jack, it's Richard." I felt my stomach drop. Richard had been out of our lives since his arrest, and I had hoped it would stay that way. "What do you want, Richard? Listen, I know I messed up, but I need to talk to you. It is about Grace." I stepped outside, not wanting the kids to overhear. "What about Grace?" "I'm out on bail," he said, his voice shaking. "I want to be a part of her life, Jack. I know I have screwed up, but she is my daughter. Please, I need to see her." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check. "Richard, you have caused enough damage. Grace is happy and safe with us. I don't want to disrupt her life." "I get that," he said, desperation seeping into his voice. "But I have rights, Jack. I want to see my daughter." "I'll talk to Emily," I said, trying to buy time. "But this isn't just about you. It's about what's best for Grace." After I hung up, I walked back inside, my mind racing. Emily looked at me, concern etched on her face. "Who was that?" "Richard," I said, sitting down heavily. "He is out on bail. He wants to see Grace." Emily's face went pale. "What? He can just walk back into our lives like that." "I know," I said, reaching for her hand. "But he does have rights. We need to figure out how to handle this." The next few days were tense. We talked to our lawyer and therapist, trying to figure out the best course of action. Ultimately, we decided to allow supervised visits, with the understanding that Richard would have to earn back our trust. The first visit was nerve-wracking. We met at a park, and Richard arrived, looking haggard and remorseful. Grace was too young to understand what was happening, but she seemed to recognize him, reaching out for him with a smile. Emily and I watched closely as Richard interacted with Grace. He was gentle and attentive, clearly trying to make up for lost time. As much as I hated to admit it, he seemed genuinely committed to being a part of her life. After the visit, Emily and I sat down with Richard. "This isn't easy for us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've caused a lot of pain, but if you are serious about being in Grace's life, we'll give you a chance." Richard nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Jack. I want to let you down." As the visits continued, I could see the positive impact on Grace. She was happier, more settled, and seemed to enjoy the time with her father. Emily and I remained cautious, but we were willing to give Richard the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, Emily and I continued to work on our relationship. The challenges with Richard added a new layer of complexity, but it also forced us to communicate and support each other in ways we hadn't before. One evening, after a particularly good day, Emily and I sat on the porch, our favorite spot for deep conversations. "You know," she said, looking at the stars, "I think we are stronger now than we ever were." I nodded, feeling a sense of pride and gratitude. "We've been through a lot, but we've come out the other side. Do you think we can keep this up?" she asked, her voice filled with hope and vulnerability. "I do," I said, taking her hand. "As long as we keep working at it, I believe we can." The months passed and we settled into a new normal. Richard's visits became a regular part of our routine, and while it wasn't always easy, it was working. Emily and I grew closer, finding a deeper connection than we had before. Then, one day, Emily came to me with a nervous smile. "Jack, there is something I need to tell you." I looked at her, my heart pounding. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I am pregnant." The words hung in the air, and for a moment I couldn't speak. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I just found out. I know it is a lot to take in, but I wanted you to know." I sat down, trying to process the news. A new baby was the last thing I expected, but as I looked at Emily, I felt a surge of hope. "Emily, this is incredible. Scary, but incredible." She smiled, relief washing over her face. "I was so worried about how you'd react." I took her hand, pulling her close. "We've faced so much together. We can handle this too." As the news sank in, we shared the excitement with Liam, Sophie, and Grace. They were thrilled at the idea of a new sibling, and their joy was contagious. The months that followed were a mix of challenges and triumphs. Emily's pregnancy brought us closer, and we navigated the ups and downs with a renewed sense of purpose. Richard's presence remained a delicate balance, but we managed to make it work for Grace's sake. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace. "We've come a long way," I said, taking her hand. "We have," she agreed, resting her head on my shoulder, "and I wouldn't change a thing." As we looked out at the horizon, I realized that our journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more unexpected twists, but we were stronger together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful about the future. With Emily by my side, our kids thriving, and a new baby on the way, I knew we could face whatever came next. The past had shaped us, but it didn't define us. We were building a new story, one filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Emily's pregnancy brought a whirlwind of changes and emotions into our lives. As her belly grew, so did our anticipation and excitement. The kids were thrilled at the prospect of a new sibling, and Emily and I found ourselves closer than we had been in years. We were determined to create a stable and loving environment for our growing family. Richard continued his supervised visits with Grace, and while it was still challenging at times, we managed to maintain a respectful and cooperative relationship. He seemed genuinely committed to being a good father, and that eased some of the tension. One afternoon, as Emily and I were setting up the nursery, she paused and looked at me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Jack, have you thought about names for the baby?" I smiled, considering her question. "I've been thinking about it, but I wanted to hear your ideas first." She laughed, a sound that had become more frequent and more precious to me. "Well, if it's a boy, how about Lucas? And if it's a girl, maybe Emma?" I nodded, liking both names. Lucas and Emma. I like that. They have a nice ring to them. As the due date approached, we made sure everything was ready. The nursery was painted a soft, calming shade of green, and the crib was set up with care. We attended birthing classes together, which brought back memories of when we prepared for Liam and Sophie's births. One evening, Emily started having contractions. We grabbed the hospital bag we had packed weeks ago and headed to the hospital. It was a familiar yet thrilling experience, filled with a mix of anxiety and excitement. The labor was long and exhausting, but Emily was a trooper. I held her hand, offering words of encouragement and support. After hours of labor, our baby finally arrived, a beautiful, healthy baby girl. We named her Emma, and as I held her in my arms, I felt a rush of love and gratitude. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "She's perfect, Jack." "She is," I agreed, kissing Emily's forehead. "You did an amazing job." We brought Emma home a few days later, and the kids were over the moon. Liam and Sophie doted on their baby sister, and even Grace seemed fascinated by the new addition. Our house was filled with laughter and love, a stark contrast to the tension and pain of the past. The first few months were challenging, as they always are with a newborn. Sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the constant need for attention tested our patience and resilience. But Emily and I worked as a team, supporting each other through the ups and downs. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Emily and I sat on the porch, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said, leaning against me. We have, I agreed, wrapping my arm around her, and I am proud of us. We've built something beautiful here. She smiled, looking out at the starlit sky. I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You've been my rock, and you've been mine, I said, feeling a deep sense of contentment. We've both grown so much through this journey. As the months passed, we settled into our new routine. Emma brought so much joy and love into our lives, and seeing the kids bond with her was heartwarming. Our family felt complete, and the future looked brighter than ever. Richard continued to be a part of Grace's life, and while it wasn't always easy, we found a way to coexist for her sake. He respected our boundaries and showed genuine care for his daughter, which made things a bit easier. One day, Emily and I decided to take the kids on a weekend trip to a nearby lake. It was our first family vacation since moving, and we were excited to create new memories together. The kids were thrilled, and even baby Emma seemed to enjoy the change of scenery. We spent the weekend swimming, hiking, and roasting marshmallows by the campfire. It was a perfect getaway, a reminder of how far we had come and how much we had to look forward to. On the last night of our trip, as we sat by the fire, Emily looked at me with a smile. "This is what it is all about, isn't it? Moments like these." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. "Yes, it is. We've been through so much, but we are stronger for it, and we have so much to be grateful for." She leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder. "I love you, Jack. I love you too, Emily," I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Always." As we watched the fire crackle and the stars twinkle above, I realized that this was the life I had been fighting for, a life filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. And with Emily by my side, I knew we could face whatever challenges came our way. We returned home from our trip, recharged and ready to continue building our new life. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, each one filled with new adventures and milestones. Emma's first steps, Liam's soccer games, Sophie's school plays, each moment a testament to our strength and determination. Through it all, Emily and I remained committed to each other and our family. Our love had been tested in ways we never imagined, but it had emerged stronger and deeper than before. And as we navigated the twists and turns of life, we did so with a sense of hope and gratitude. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a smile. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" "We have," I said, taking her hand, "and I wouldn't change a thing." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over our home, I felt a profound sense of peace. Our journey had been filled with unexpected challenges and trials, but it had also brought us closer together. And as we looked to the future, I knew that whatever came our way, we would face it together as a family. With Emily by my side and our children's laughter filling the air, I realized that we had truly found our way back to happiness. The past had shaped us, but it didn't define us. We were building a new story, one filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As we settled into our new lives, the sense of peace and stability we had worked so hard to achieve became more tangible. Emily and I continued to grow closer, our relationship stronger and more resilient than ever. The kids flourished in their new environment, and Emma's bright smiles and giggles filled our home with joy. But life, as always, had more lessons to teach us. One sunny afternoon, while Emily and I were watching the kids play in the yard, I received a call from my old friend and former neighbor, Tom. "Hey, Jack. It's been a while. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to let you know that there's been some talk in the old neighborhood about Richard's case." I frowned, my heart sinking a bit. "What is going on, Tom?" "Richard's trial is coming up, and there's a lot of buzz about it. People are speculating about what's going to happen, and I thought you should know in case it affects you and Emily." "Thanks for the heads up," I said, my mind racing. "I'll talk to Emily and see what we can do to prepare." After hanging up, I looked at Emily, who had been watching me with concern. "What's wrong, Jack?" "Richard's trial is coming up," I explained. "There's a lot of talk about it back in the old neighborhood. We need to be prepared for whatever happens." She nodded, worry etched on her face. "I was hoping we could put all of that behind us." "I know," I said, taking her hand. But we've faced everything together so far, and we'll get through this too. We reached out to our lawyer and made sure we were prepared for any potential fallout. Richard S. trial brought back a lot of old memories and fears, but we focused on staying strong for the kids and each other. As the trial date approached, we made a conscious effort to shield the children from the stress. We kept their routines as normal as possible, ensuring they felt safe and loved. Liam, Sophie, and even little Emma remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. The day of the trial arrived, and Emily and I attended to show our support for Grace. Richard looked tense but determined, and as he took the stand, I could see the weight of his actions bearing down on him. The proceedings were intense and emotional. Richard S.'s past indiscretions were laid bare for all to see, and it was clear that he regretted his choices. Emily and I listened, our hearts heavy with a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of closure. When the verdict was finally delivered, Richard was sentenced to several years in prison. As he was led away, he turned to us and mouthed the words, "I am sorry." It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. He was taking responsibility for his actions, and that was a step toward healing. In the days that followed, we helped Grace understand what had happened. It was difficult, but we reassured her that she was loved and that her father would still be a part of her life, even if it was from a distance. One evening, as we sat on the porch reflecting on everything, Emily turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Jack, I've been thinking, maybe it's time for us to create some new traditions, something that is just ours." I smiled, liking the idea. "What did you have in mind?" "Something simple," she said, her eyes lighting up, "like a family game night every Friday or a monthly outing where we explore new places together." "I love that idea," I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Let us start this Friday." Our first family game night was a huge success. We played board games, laughed until our sides hurt, and enjoyed each other's company. It was a reminder of how far we had come and how much we had to look forward to. As the months passed, these new traditions became a cherished part of our lives. We explored nearby parks, tried new restaurants, and even took a few weekend trips to nearby towns. Each adventure brought us closer together, strengthening the bonds that had been tested but never broken. One weekend, we decided to visit a small coastal town a few hours away. The kids were excited about the beach, and Emily and I looked forward to some quality family time. As we walked along the shoreline, watching the waves crash against the rocks, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. "This is perfect," Emily said, taking my hand as we watched the kids build sandcastles. "I couldn't have asked for a better life." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "We've been through so much, but it's made us stronger. I'm grateful for every moment." As we stood there, the sun setting behind us, I realized that the future was ours to shape. We had faced our demons, overcome incredible odds, and come out the other side stronger and more united than ever. That evening, as we sat around a bonfire on the beach, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, I looked at my family with a heart full of love and gratitude. Emily, Liam, Sophie, Grace, and little Emma. We had all been through so much, but we had found our way back to each other. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led us to this moment, a moment of peace, love, and hope. And as I looked into the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Because that is what family does. We support each other, love each other, and build each other up. And with Emily by my side, I knew that we could conquer anything that came our way. We had created a new story, one filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as we embraced the future, I knew that we were exactly where we were meant to be,